My name is Devin Randall,
I'm VJ Rowan.
I'm Daniel Stutz.
And I'm Blake Vanderkamp.
and our presentation is on a socioeconomic lens on educational disadvantages.
All right, so to begin, I want to introduce our topics. We have the socioeconomic, or educationally disadvantaged focus on the socioeconomic lens. So to begin, poverty rates in the United States has reached about 11.8% in the past year. And unfortunately, in the past 50 years, poverty rates have in fact gone up. In addition, 22% of all children under the age of 18 are actually living in poverty. And because of that, these children who, in many cases, are starting off their school careers are pretty talented and pretty gifted, but they're not able to get the successful future because they don't have the opportunities. And we decided to choose this topic because we feel it's just something that's really important, and it's not really brought up in society as much today as we feel it should be. And so we just want to kind of bring up some resolutions to help fix that issue.
So first off, it's very important that we're able to define educational disadvantages, especially for those students who are of a lower socioeconomic status, and how that specifically will affect their education. One of the easiest ways to measure that is a graduation rate. And as you can see, the socioeconomic status of the community in which a student grows up can greatly affect, up to 20% can affect the graduation rate of students from that community. And that's just an easy way to see that the community of the student is easily affects their education. Another example is school availability. And school availability is also a lot harder to come by in communities with a lower socioeconomic status. And not only are there less schools to choose from, there are less private school options, and public schools also don't have the funding that a lot of other public schools do, and communities with higher socioeconomic status. So these students who are growing up in less wealthy communities are more often having to deal with less resources at school that other students just don't have to deal with.
Now, honestly, it's quite surprising that this issue is not touched on more because educational disadvantage due to socioeconomic standing has been something that's been around since ancient Egyptians and has been quite prevalent since that time period. It's generally been a good rule of thumb that nobles or those of higher standing in society end up getting the education, while those that are closer to the peasant level won't get an education or will get the limited education that they can achieve through their parents. Now, throughout the world, this socioeconomic educational disadvantage is still prevalent. Many nations will either not have enough evidence on it because they aren't focused on it, or these gaps in education aren't necessarily that prevalent. However, it is also known that immigrants will have a much lower economic stand or economic place in a country than the natives. That's generally just how it works. Immigrants won't get the same jobs, the higher paying jobs that natives can get. They won't get as many opportunities, and that's simply just how the world is right now. Generally, this disadvantage also exists between rural and urban communities, and that's mainly a distance thing. However, if one does not have enough money to get a car, that distance could make education really difficult to achieve. Thus, those countries that have a large gap between rural and urban economic standings also have this problem.
And then diving a little bit deeper into contemporary examples of this, we've seen it a lot through the COVID-19 pandemic, as 56% of college students claim that they can no longer afford their tuition tab. And this is concerning as we see that once someone is unable to graduate high school or graduate college, this normally starts a cycle focused around low income status and socioeconomic status as well, because they aren't able to provide better opportunities for themselves in the future compared to their graduating and higher socioeconomic counterparts. But one method that we currently use to combat the efforts is through teach grants, in which undergraduate students at public universities and private universities are often offered opportunities to pay their tuition in exchange for going to a low income school district. But unfortunately, most of these teachers end up going to these areas for the period that they're required to, and then they leave immediately due to the unfortunate conditions at these schools, but it leads to the expense of the psychological well-being and the social development of the students, and doesn't really resolve the issue of low income socioeconomic status and its effect on education.
So some of the resolutions that we have are, the first one is legislation carried out by the government to help reduce the gap, because we just feel like the legislation by the government can help to kind of provide funding for low income school districts to kind of help balance out the gap. The second one is volunteer services. Some examples of that are like tutoring services and everything. A lot of kids do that at their own high schools, as well as some parents help out the districts doing that. So I feel like that'd be another good thing. And then the last one would just be donating supplies to some of these schools, because in a lot of cases, the schools don't have enough money to get the resources for their students. So donating supplies would be something that would really help to fix that issue.